I watched them sign it. Their boardroom smelled like stale coffee and too much ego, but for once they were silent. The HR director's pen scratched across the apology I had drafted myself, the legal language so precise it left no wiggle room. Effective immediately, we acknowledge our error in materially altering Mr. Reed Ashcroft's role and compensation in violation of standing contractual obligations. We extend our formal apology for the treatment he received. I made them write it. I made them say it. And I sat across the table, calm, hands folded, while the CEO's face went an embarrassing shade of pink. Nobody spoke for a moment after it was done. They didn't want to be there. They didn't want to admit anything. But they had to, because I'd found the clause. The old contract sat beside their apology on the polished table. Edges soft from 9 years of being jammed into files and drawers no one had opened in years. That was their mistake. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. When it was done, I picked up the printed apology and slid it into my folder. It felt heavier than paper should. Not because of the ink, but because of what it meant. Not revenge. Proof. Proof I hadn't deserved what they did. Proof they knew it too. I stood up slowly, letting the chair squeak. The conference room felt small suddenly, air too warm, blinds drawn against the Seattle drizzle. "Thank you," I said evenly. No one replied. HR averted his eyes. The CEO muttered something under his breath. I didn't bother parsing. I nodded once and left them there, quiet in their guilt. If you'd told me 6 months ago I'd be drafting their apology for them to sign, I'd have laughed in your face. Hell, I would have called you crazy. Because 6 months ago, I was a company man. My name's Reed Ashcroft, 42, Director of Client Success at Halden & Bryce, or at least I was. 9 years at the same company. 9 years of keeping clients from jumping ship during rocky integrations, soothing furious vendors at 2 a.m., writing proposal decks at my kitchen table with bad coffee and better resolve. I wasn't flashy, but I was steady. The guy who showed up. My business card didn't just say, Director. It was my promise that no matter how messy things got, I'd handle it. I was proud of that. Ridiculously so. And for a long time, it mattered. When I started at Halden & Bryce, we were 50 people with secondhand chairs and a dream of taking on the big consultancies. The founders used to know our birthdays. We had pizza Fridays. It felt human. We solved messy client problems other firms wouldn't touch. We built relationships so strong they didn't care if our logo wasn't as famous. That's what kept me there. Even after the acquisitions started. After the new management jargon crept in. After they started calling us cost centers instead of teams. I told myself I could keep it human. If I just worked harder. If I just didn't flinch. And for a while, that was true. But companies don't change in a day. They rot slowly. It started with the layoffs always. Strategic realignments. Then came the resource optimization meetings. My team of 6 became 4. Then 3. But the client list never shrank. And I stayed. Because I believed it would get better. Because I needed the health insurance for my kid's inhaler. Because I'd invested almost a decade of my life. That's how they get you. But the worst wasn't the workload. It was the day they decided I was too expensive. A meeting invite out of nowhere. Aligning expectations. I remember standing outside that glass-walled conference room, adjusting my tie like it might somehow shield me. Inside, the regional director sat waiting, polished shoes and practiced smirk. HR beside him with a folder that looked way too thin for anything good. They didn't even have the decency to pretend it was a conversation. They called it realigning my compensation to industry benchmarks, which is corporate for, you're overpaid, and we don't value you. 50%. They cut my pay in half. On the spot. No lead-up. No performance review. No warning. Just a number on a paper. I didn't shout. Didn't cry. Didn't even blink. I picked up that piece of paper, folded it neatly, and asked for 24 hours. Like I was still playing their game, because that's what they expected. For me to nod. For me to thank them. For me to stay. I didn't. And if you're wondering how I turned their insult into their apology, how I forced their polished CEO to sign my words in front of HR and legal, sit tight, because that's a story worth telling. They called it a conversation, but it was an ambush. I still remember the conference room number. 17B. Sounds official, right? Like it should be a place for strategy or collaboration. Instead, It was just a sterile little box with acoustic panels that did nothing to muffle the humiliation inside. HR was already there when I walked in. Samantha, head of people ops, had a folder in front of her that was too thin to hold anything good. She wouldn't meet my eyes. Beside her sat Trevor Laird, Regional Director for Operational Efficiency, which was corporate speak for, "I'm here to cut your legs out from under you and smile while I do it." He stood up, way too eager to show off his tailored suit, and gave me that tight plastic grin. "Reed, thanks for coming on short notice." I nodded once. Didn't realize this was urgent. Samantha cleared her throat but said nothing. Trevor gestured to the seat. "Please, let's keep this friendly." "Friendly?" "Sure." I sat down slowly, placing my notebook on the table even though I knew I wouldn't need it. He started with pleasantries. "We've really valued your contributions over the years." His voice was oily. I just listened. He kept going, talked about market conditions, budget constraints, alignment with corporate goals. I studied his face while he spoke. He didn't believe a word of it. He didn't have to. This wasn't a negotiation. Eventually, Samantha slid the paper across to me. She still wouldn't look up. My name sat at the top in clean sans serif letters. Below it, effective immediately. Title change from Director of Client Success to Senior Client Support Associate. Salary adjusted accordingly. 48% reduction. My hands didn't shake. I ran a thumb along the paper's edge, feeling the absurd corporate branding watermark behind the black and white betrayal. I lifted my eyes. Trevor was watching me, studying my reaction like a hunter, waiting for an animal to bolt. "Is this a joke?" I asked flatly. Samantha flinched. Trevor leaned back in his chair like he was settling in for a show. "No, Reed. It's about realignment. Given the acquisition, certain director roles are redundant. This allows us to maintain your employment while right-sizing the org." Right-sizing. God, I hate that word. As if I were some misshapen lump they had to carve down. I held up the paper. 48% cut? Immediate title demotion? Who approved this? Trevor didn't even blink. "The board. Legal. HR. He smiled. "As you know. These things aren't personal." But it was personal. They picked me for this. They wanted me humiliated. My eyes slid to Samantha. Her mouth tightened. She'd been there during my onboarding 9 years ago. She was the one who'd emailed congratulations when I made director. Now, she couldn't meet my gaze. I felt my chest burn. Not with rage yet. With shame. Because they were doing this in front of HR for a reason. So there'd be no blow-up. No yelling. No scene. A controlled kill. I took a slow breath. Trevor watched it happen. He wanted to see if I'd beg. If I'd loose it. I didn't. I pressed the paper flat against the table, aligning its corners. "Just so I'm clear," I said carefully. "This is take it or leave it." Trevor nodded. "All compensation changes effective immediately. Accept or resign." There it was. No courtesy. No second meeting. Just corporate cruelty in a single page. The silence thickened. Samantha finally spoke, voice so small I almost missed it. "You'll have until 5 p.m. to decide." My mouth felt dry. I glanced at the cheap branded pen beside the folder. "Generous," I said. Trevor chuckled. He actually chuckled. "Come on, Reed. It's just business. You've been around long enough to know how this works." He didn't even bother to pretend he respected me. That's when something in me cooled. Not broke, not snapped. Just cooled. Like steel dipped in water. I stood up, slowly folding the page once, twice. I tucked it into my notebook. "Appreciate the clarity," I said, voice steady. "I'll let you know." Trevor leaned back, satisfied. Samantha exhaled like she'd been holding her breath the entire time. I didn't look at either of them again. I opened the door myself. Outside, I paused. The hallway was empty. Carpet that smelled like industrial cleaner. Muted company logo embossed on the wall. I stared at that logo. 9 years. 9 years of weekends. Of emergency client calls. Of building trust one hard conversation at a time. 9 years of fighting to keep clients from leaving even as the company treated us like replaceable parts. And they'd reduced all of that to half a salary and a new title printed in Arial. I didn't rage. Didn't cry. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button, waited. My reflection in the stainless steel doors looked older than it had that morning. When the doors opened, I stepped inside, and as they closed, sealing me in with my folded demotion letter, I let out a slow, cold exhale. They thought that was the end of it, that they'd forced my hand, that I'd either crawl back for scraps or disappear quietly. They didn't know me at all. I didn't fight them that day. But I wasn't done. I didn't go back to my desk. I didn't say goodbye. I walked straight out the lobby doors, ignoring the security guard's half-wave. It was raining, naturally. Seattle always feels like it's raining when your life falls apart. I didn't bother with an umbrella. The folded demotion letter went damp in my pocket, the ink starting to blur where it said, Senior Client Support Associate. Funny. For 9 years I'd bled for them. Now I wasn't even worth the dignity of a private conversation. My car smelled like stale coffee and last week's fast food wrappers. I sat behind the wheel and just stared through the windshield. Wipers squeaked. A pedestrian in a poncho trudged by. It was quiet, except for the rain hitting the glass. My phone buzzed once, twice. Meeting invites, client follow-ups, automatic pings from Slack channels I'd built from scratch. I turned it off. I drove home on autopilot. Gray freeway. Brake lights smeared by water. 9 years. That's longer than my marriage lasted. Longer than my kids been alive. I pulled into my driveway and sat there a long time, watching the rain bead on the hood, thinking about how I was going to explain this. When I finally stepped inside, the house was quiet. Marissa was at her after-school club. I had the living room to myself. I dropped the wet letter on the coffee table. It landed with a slap. My jacket dripped on the floor. I stood there, listening to the silence, felt the humiliation settle in my chest like a weight. I'm not the sort who cries, not even at me divorce hearing, not even when my dad died. But standing there, alone in that dark living room, I felt something crack. Not tears, but anger. A low, cold fury that started somewhere in my gut and spread until my hands were shaking. I'd given them everything. Weekends, nights, my sanity, my reputation with clients, my health, if I'm being honest. And for what? A 50% pay cut and a new title that might as well have said, expendable. I walked to the kitchen and turned on the light. Yellow glow on the countertop clutter. Bills. School permission slips. A coupon for takeout. Real life. The life I was supposed to keep afloat. I pulled the folded letter back out. Read it again. Senior Client Support Associate. God. I tossed it in the trash. Watched it land on top of yesterday's grounds and eggshells. But I didn't feel better. I poured a drink. Not too much. Just enough to dull the immediate sting. I leaned against the counter and stared at my reflection in the dark microwave door. Who the hell was I? A man who let them do that? A man who let them define his worth? Because that's what this was. It wasn't just about money. It was about being told I didn't matter. That I was lucky they even offered me scraps. My eyes drifted to the hallway. The closet door was ajar. Inside was my old briefcase. Still had the company logo embossed on the leather. Back when they handed those out to new directors. An empty gesture, but at the time it felt like they were saying, welcome to the family. I stepped over and opened it. Inside, old papers shifted. Client notes. Handwritten scrawls on yellow pads. And at the very bottom, my original employment contract. Signed in blue ink 9 years ago, when we were still small enough that every clause actually meant something. I pulled it out carefully. Pages yellowing at the edges, but every word still there, including the signature from one of the founding partners, the partner who'd actually cared about people. I ran my thumb along the line that said Director of Client Success, as if it were carved in stone. I remembered the day I signed it. Proud, excited, terrified, in a good way. That contract was more than an agreement. It was a promise, and they'd broken it. I sat down at the kitchen table, the contract in front of me. Ran my eyes over the fine print, line by line, old legalese that most people skipped over. Hell, I'd skipped it for years. But tonight, I read it, really read it, because they might have forgotten what they wrote. But I hadn't. Not anymore. I heard Marissa's key in the door. She was humming to herself, unaware. Safe. That was my job. I closed the contract and pushed it aside, put on a smile, didn't let her see the tremor in my fingers. Because if there was one thing I'd learned in 9 years at Halden and Bryce, they never expected you to pay attention. They counted on you being too tired, too loyal, too afraid. But I wasn't afraid anymore, because somewhere in those pages was the leverage I needed. The thing they thought I'd never find. I waited until Marissa was asleep, tucked her in, kissed her forehead, told her school would be fine tomorrow. She didn't know, didn't see the tightness in my jaw, or the way my eyes kept flicking to the kitchen. Kids have a way of believing you're unbreakable. It's the worst lie you ever tell them. When the house was quiet, I went back to the kitchen table, turned on the overhead light, sat down, and spread the contract out like a map I'd lost the trail on years ago. 9 years, dozens of revisions since. But this was the original. The one they'd made me sign when they were so desperate for talent they actually promised things. I ran my fingers over the company letterhead, now faded. The signature from the founding partner. Back when they gave a damn. I didn't rush. Didn't want to miss anything. I read it slowly, like I was studying for the bar exam I'd never taken. Paragraph by paragraph. Clause by clause. They always say the devil's in the details. But sometimes the angel is too. And then I found it. Clause 7.4. Change of responsibilities. Plain black ink on yellowing paper. Any material modification of the employee's title, core duties, or reporting line, without mutual written consent, shall trigger automatic release from any transitional obligations or handover requirements. Simple. Elegant. Ironclad. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. They'd made me Director of Client Success. I'd negotiated that title when I joined, because titles mattered in this industry. Not for ego, for trust. Clients liked knowing they had a director on the line at 2 a.m. Vendors deferred faster. It closed deals. It justified the bill rate. And they'd known it, which is why they'd included that clause. So I wouldn't bolt the moment things got rocky. It protected them, except it protected me too. They forgot. They thought I'd forget too. They assumed I'd never bother reading it. When they demoted me to senior associate, that wasn't just a pay cut. It was a material change of title and core duties. And they hadn't asked for my consent, which meant they'd nullified my obligation to stay on for 90 days of client transition. They couldn't make me train my replacement, couldn't make me hand over my client notes, couldn't make me do a damn thing. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. But not from fear anymore, from clarity. Because in a business like this, the real power isn't who yells the loudest. It's who can prove what's on paper. I pulled a pad of sticky notes closer, started marking the sections. Clause 7,4. Compensation table on page Cox. Termination conditions on page 6. I circled dates, noted the signature block, underlined the phrase mutual written consent. I wasn't a lawyer, but I'd worked with enough of them to know. Plain language wins. And this was as plain as it got. The house creaked as it settled. My clock ticked. Refrigerator hummel. I didn't hear any of it. Just the blood in my ears and the scratching of my pen. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was insurance. Because they thought they'd backed me into a corner. They wanted me so humiliated I'd either accept the scraps or quit on the spot. They were counting on me to panic, to flinch, to leave quietly, so they could say it was my choice. But I wasn't leaving quietly. And I wasn't flinching. By the time I was done marking it up, the contract looked like a battlefield. Highlighter, sticky flags, notes in the margin, every single word I needed, ready to fire. Because this wasn't some trap I set for them. I didn't engineer it. I didn't blackmail them. I didn't lie. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. I stacked the contract neatly, closed my pen with a click, leaned back. My shoulders ached from the tension finally leaving them. My mouth tasted bitter from the coffee gone cold at my elbow. But I felt steady, more steady than I had in weeks. They didn't know it yet, but they'd already lost. I stood up, flicked off the kitchen light, and let the house go dark. Marissa's door was cracked just enough that I could see her breathing evenly in the glow of her nightlight. The real reason I couldn't afford to lose. Not the house. Not the job. The example. She had to know you don't let people decide your worth. I whispered goodnight to her, even if she couldn't hear me. Then I went to my own room, the contract under my arm, and laid it on the nightstand like a promise. I had the clause. Now I needed the plan. I didn't sleep much that night. Not from fear. From focus. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the rain tapping the window, replaying every line of that contract in my head. Clause 7,4. Material modification. No mutual written consent. Automatic release. 4 words that changed everything. By dawn, my plan wasn't just forming. It was done. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accuracy. Precision. They hadn't just insulted me, they'd underestimated me. That was their real mistake. When the sun finally pushed its way through the clouds, I got up and made coffee. Not because I needed it, but because rituals matter when you're about to do something you can't take back. I set the mug beside the contract on the table, looked at it like a blueprint for their failure. I opened my laptop, old corporate email archives, saved PDFs, meeting notes. It was all there. I'd never been sloppy. Every performance review praising my client retention, every quarterly deck showing my revenue contribution, every exceeds expectations note from VPs who'd long since been replaced. I wasn't going to use it to shame them. I was going to remind them who I was. I drafted an email. Clean, professional, no threats, no caps lock. Dear Samantha and Trevor, please find attached the original employment contract I signed with Halden and Bryce, as well as highlighted sections regarding material modification of duties and compensation. I believe our recent discussion triggered Clause 7.4. As a result, I am not obligated to provide any transitional or handover services post-separation. Please confirm receipt. I reread it 3 times, deleted any words that sounded angry, left only the facts, because that was the part they couldn't fight. When I was happy with it, I saved it to drafts. Didn't send it yet. I wasn't stupid. First, I made copies of the contract, scanned and saved, printed 3 extra hard copies. 1 went in my safe, 1 in my briefcase, 1 in the glove compartment of my car. They weren't going to lose this document. I checked my phone. 9:03 a.m. Early enough that my old colleague Drew might still be on his first coffee at his boutique compliance firm. Drew was the kind of guy who read contracts for fun. We hadn't talked in months, but I still had his number. He'd left Halden and Bryce 2 years before, said he didn't want to be part of optimizing humans into line items. We'd laughed about it then, but he'd been right. I called him. Reed Ashcroft, he answered. Sounded sleepy, but alert. Jesus, man. It's been forever. I didn't bother with small talk. Drew, I need a second opinion. That woke him up. Legal? Compliance. He whistled. Of course. Email it. I sent the scans while we were on the phone. He didn't say much while he read. Just the occasional exhale. Finally, Jesus Christ, Reed. I waited. This clause is beautiful. Mutual consent? They didn't get it? They demoted me in front of HR. 50% cut. No discussion. Silence on the line. Then a short laugh. Bitter. They're screwed. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. So it's real? Oh, it's real. This is textbook. They can't enforce any handover requirements if you walk. You're free. I didn't smile. Didn't gloat. I just nodded even though he couldn't see it. I don't want to blow anything up, I said quietly. I just want them to acknowledge it. Drew's voice softened it. Yeah. I know you, Reed. You want it clean? He paused. Send them that email you drafted. Don't threaten. Don't mention lawyers. Just the clause. Let them read their own mistake. I nodded again. Thanks. You owe me a beer. 2, I said. And hung up. I stared at the email draft. My finger hovered over. Send. Clicked it. There was no going back. Within an hour, I got a reply. Short. Formal. Samantha, of course. Read. Received. We will review with legal and get back to you. That was it. No apology. No panits. Yet, I closed my laptop and pushed back from the table. Exhaled slowly. My coffee was cold. Didn't matter. I'd set it in motion. I didn't need to scream. Didn't need to threaten. All I had to do was wait, because they'd written this trap for themselves. I just reminded them it existed. I looked at the stack of marked-up contracts, the sticky notes in corporate yellow. Evidence. Insurance. Freedom. Marissa wandered in, still in pajamas. Dad, can we make waffles? I smiled at her. Nodded. Yeah, kiddo, we can make waffles. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't worried about what I'd say to her when she asked why Dad wasn't at work. I'd have an answer. The right one. I'd sent the email. But the real confrontation was waiting in their boardroom. They didn't waste time. The reply came the next morning. Subject line clinical. Meeting to discuss contractual concerns. 9:30 a.m. No please. No thanks. No apology. I didn't expect one. I put on my best shirt. The one I'd worn for closing pitches when they still valued me. Brushed my hair carefully. Tied me tight. Like armor. Marissa was watching cartoons on the couch. She looked up. Do you have to go back there? I paused at the door. Just for today. I forced a small smile. Daddy's got some paperwork. She squinted at me like she could smell the lie, but she let me go. It was raining again. Of course it was. Seattle never did catharsis in sunshine. The parking lot was half empty this early. I sat in my car a minute, engine ticking as it cooled. Then I grabbed my folder. Inside, 3 printed copies of my original contract, annotated in red and yellow. Sticky notes like battle plans. Their own words waiting to turn on them. The receptionist looked up when I walked in. Her smile froze. Mr. Ashcroft, they're waiting for you." I just nodded. Didn't waste breath on small talk. They'd picked the big boardroom, the one with the fake wood paneling and the giant table that made you feel small. Trevor was there, of course. Samantha from HR. And someone from legal I hadn't met before. 3 on 1. Classic. Trevor gave me his best conciliatory smirk. "Reed, thanks for coming in." I sat down slowly, placed my folder on the table, opened it deliberately. No one spoke while I did it. They watched the pages, the highlights, the signatures. Samantha cleared her throat. "We wanted to discuss your email." She wouldn't meet my eyes. Classic HR move. I stayed silent. Let the quiet grow heavy. I'd learned that trick years ago. Make them speak first. Legal was the one who cracked. She leaned forward, tapping the clause with one polished fingernail. Clause 7.4. "You're claiming this releases you from all transitional obligations?" I didn't flinch. "It doesn't just release me. It nullifies them, automatically." I turned the page so it faced them. "Read it aloud. Word by word. Any material modification of the employee's title, core duties, or reporting line, without mutual written consent, shall trigger automatic release from any transitional obligations or handover requirements." Trevor tried to interrupt. "Reed, come on, this isn't how we want to do this." I held up a finger. Not angrily, just precise. "I didn't write this. Your company did." Samantha shifted in her chair. HR hates liability. I could see the sweat at her temple. Legal's eyes narrowed. They were already planning how to spin this. But they knew. They'd lost. Trevor leaned back, trying casual. "Let's be reasonable. We can work something out. If you'll agree to a short handover." I closed the folder. "Trevor? Number." My voice was calm. So calm it was dangerous. "I'm not doing a handover. I'm not training my replacement. I'm not writing transition docs. You waived that when you demoted me without my consent." Silence, except for the rain ticking the windows. Legal tried to soften it. "Reed, perhaps we can discuss compensation for your cooperation." I raised an eyebrow. "Now you want to negotiate? After making the change unilaterally? After humiliating me in front of HR number?" Samantha's voice cracked slightly. "What is it you want?" Finally, the question they were terrified to ask. I leaned in slightly. "I want acknowledgement. On paper. Signed." Trevor's jaw tightened. "A public apology?" I didn't blink. "At minimum." Legal scribbled notes furiously. Samantha swallowed. Trevor looked like he wanted to throw the table. I didn't smile. Didn't gloat. Just waited. Let them think. Let them feel the weight. Because this wasn't revenge. This was accountability. Their own words. Their own clause. Their failure to read what they'd written. Finally, Legal exhaled. "Give us your terms in writing. We'll review." I nodded once. Calm. Measured. I gathered my folder, making sure they saw the annotations. The work I'd done. The preparation. The fact I wasn't bluffing. "Thank you for your time," I said evenly. "Looking forward to your reply." And I stood up, walked out without looking back. The receptionist didn't even try to smile this time. Just watched me leave like she was witnessing something she didn't quite understand. Outside, I paused under the overhang, watching the rain. Let it hit the concrete. Felt the adrenaline drain from my shoulders. I didn't feel triumphant. Just steady. Settled, because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the one waiting to see what they'd do to me. They were waiting to see what I'd do next. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. If you think details don't matter, think again. Hit subscribe if you want more stories like this. They thought agreeing would be easy. Then they saw what I made them sign. They didn't reply that afternoon. I wasn't surprised. Legal needed time to spin. HR needed time to panic. Trevor needed time to figure out how to swallow his pride. I went home, did the dishes, helped Marissa with her math homework, watched a rerun of a cooking show I didn't even like, because this was the easy part. Waiting. I'd done my work. Now it was their move. The email came the next morning. Simple subject line. Proposed resolution. I read it twice. HR must have written it while chewing antacids. Read. In the interest of an amicable resolution, we are willing to entertain a formal acknowledgement of the misunderstanding regarding your role change, as well as an adjustment to the exit terms. Please propose language you deem appropriate. Misunderstanding. They couldn't even say demotion. Couldn't say humiliation. Couldn't say wrong. But I'd expected that. I closed the email. Saturday, back in my chair. Looked at the old contract, still open beside me. The clause that had saved me. It wasn't about vengeance. I wasn't trying to burn the place down. I didn't want to pay out to disappear and feel dirty every time I cashed it. I wanted something better. I opened a new document. Typed the words slowly, deliberately. We, the undersigned on behalf of Halden and Bryce Consulting, formally acknowledge that our recent changes to Reed Ashcroft's title and compensation were executed without securing mutual written consent, constituting a breach of the original employment agreement. We apologize for the handling of this change and any professional harm it caused. No corporate jargon. No misunderstanding. Just truth. Legal. Precise. Undeniable. I read it 3 times. Each line landed like a punch I'd owed them for months, but it didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean. Marissa wandered in halfway through. What you writing? I closed the screen. Just work. She nodded, unfazed. Kids didn't understand betrayal at work. And if I did this right, she wouldn't have to for a long time. I attached the document to my reply. Short, polite, professional. Please see proposed language attached. This phrasing is non-negotiable. I sent it, closed the laptop, went for a walk. Seattle's winter rain was icy on my face. I let it soak through. Didn't flinch. Didn't rush. I was in no hurry anymore. I'd waited 9 years for respect. Another hour wouldn't kill me. When I got back, there was no reply. Not that day. Not the next. But on the 3rd day, my phone buzzed at 7:12 a.m. HR? No subject line. Just the document attached. Signed. Stamped. Their letterhead at the top. I opened it. They hadn't changed a single word. I read it once. Closed my eyes. I didn't smile. Didn't whoop or cheer or pump my fist. I just breathed. Deep. Slow. Because it wasn't just about me. It was about anyone they'd try this on next. Because now there was proof. A precedent. A signed admission they'd crossed a line. I printed 2 copies. One for me. One for the safe. The paper was thick, expensive corporate stock. It felt almost smug in my fingers, like it couldn't believe it had been used for this. I laid it flat on the table. Read it aloud. Just once. We, the undersigned, on behalf of Halden and Bryce Consulting, formally acknowledge. Each word like a nail in the coffin of their plausible deniability. That afternoon, Samantha called. Her voice was tight, polite, wounded. Reed, we appreciate you working with us to find a resolution. I said nothing. Let the silence hang. She tried again. We'll process this with payroll for your severance and your benefits continuation paperwork. Thank you, I said finally, because there was nothing else to say. I wasn't going to make it easy, but I wasn't going to be cruel. After we hung up, I stared at the document one last time. Let my eyes rest on my name at the top. The apology, in legal black and white. Their signatures at the bottom. It wasn't revenge. Not really. It was recognition. It was making them say what they'd done. Out loud. In writing. Because the truth was simple. They thought they could redefine my worth with a single meeting invite. A single piece of paper. A single line in a budget spreadsheet. But the fine print had other ideas. So did I. I slid the signed apology into my folder. Tucked it behind my contract. Proof of promise kept. And betrayal admitted. They wrote the rules, I just read them better. Now that I had what I wanted, it was time to walk away on my terms. I didn't rush to write my resignation. I let it sit for a day. Not out of uncertainty. Out of deliberation. If they wanted to see me sweat, they'd wait forever. If they thought I'd come crawling back for a better offer, they didn't know me at all. They'd already signed the apology. Admitted their mistake in black and white. Now it was my turn to finish it. I opened a blank document on my laptop. Typed slowly. Carefully. Every sentence felt like a final nail in the coffin of the man they thought they owned. To the board in HR, effective immediately, I resign my position with Halden and Bryce Consulting. As noted in my original employment contract, Clause 7.4 releases me from any transitional or handover obligations given the material, unilateral modification of my title, and compensation without mutual consent. I will not participate in knowledge transfer or client transition activities. Please confirm receipt. No regret to inform. No thank you for the opportunity. No unnecessary adjectives. Just facts. Cold. Clinical. I reread it twice. Checked every word. No threats. No insults. Nothing they could use to paint me as emotional or unprofessional. Just the truth. Marissa was doing homework at the table. She glanced at me over her pencil. You done with work? I managed to smile. Yeah, kiddo. I'm done. I clicked send. Watched the email disappear. Felt something release in my chest. I didn't know I'd been holding. For the first time in weeks. No one could tell me what I had to do. No meeting invites. No forced alignment calls. No HR ambushes. Just silence. My own? They replied the next morning. Samantha, of course. Short. Polite. Resigned in every sense. Read. Confirming receipt of your notice. We acknowledge your position regarding Clause 7.4 and will not require any transitional activities. Your severance paperwork and benefits continuation forms will be sent shortly. Translation. We lost. We can't make you do anything. We're just trying to wrap this up before legal yells at us. I sat back, stared at the screen. No satisfaction. No fist pumping. Just the quiet certainty of a promise kept. They couldn't force me to train my replacement. Couldn't demand my client list. Couldn't parade me in front of the team for knowledge transfer sessions. They'd tried to strip me of dignity in a 5-minute meeting. Instead, they'd given me leverage. I printed the resignation email, clipped it behind the signed apology in my folder. Proof. All of it. Because you don't burn bridges by screaming at them. You let them collapse under their own weight. Trevor called once. I didn't pick up. He didn't leave a message. HR sent my exit document. Clean. Sterile. They even included a generic, "We wish you well in your future endeavors" line that made me snort. I signed them, scanned and sent them back. No notes. No edits. Done. Final. That afternoon, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee. No meeting to rush to. No Slack channel pinging. No panitskid client calls. Just me. Breathing. Marissa patted in, still in socks. She eyed me carefully. You're really not going back? I shook my head. Nope. She blinked. Are you in trouble? That one hit. Square in the chest. I set the coffee down. Leaned forward. Number. Not trouble. I just decided I didn't want to work for people who don't respect me. She processed that slowly, then nodded. Okay. And wandered off to watch television. Kids. Brutal. But fair. I picked up the folder again. Flipped through the pages. Original contract. Highlighted clause 7,4. The signed apology on corporate letterhead. My resignation. A record of everything they thought I'd be too scared, too loyal, too tired to do. It wasn't revenge. Not really. I hadn't sabotaged them. Hadn't stolen a client list. Hadn't trashed them online. I just refused to give them anything else. Refused to play by their rewritten rules. Made them play by their own. And when it was over, I got to walk away clean. No screaming. No meltdown. Just quiet. And free. I closed the folder. Slid it onto the shelf. Not hidden. Not flaunted. Just there. A reminder. A leçon. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. I didn't advertise what happened. But the people who needed to know, they found out. I didn't tell anyone I was leaving. Not at first. No goodbye email. No Slack sign-off. No LinkedIn post about new beginnings. I just stopped showing up. Stopped replying. Stopped letting them use my name to cover their cracks. They wanted me gone. They got it. For the first week, the office pretended it was normal. I knew the pattern. Trevor would spin it as mutual separation. HR would call it a realignment outcome. They'd reassure everyone the transition plan was in place. Except there wasn't one. Because I hadn't given them one. Because Clause 7.4 said, I didn't have to. I didn't see it myself. But I heard about it. First from Dylan. He'd been my junior for 3 years. Solid. Steady. He texted me 3 days after I sent my resignation. "Hey man, did you really leave? No warning? They're scrambling here." I didn't answer right away. When I did, I kept it simple. They made their choice. I made mine. Next was Priya, brilliant project manager. She messaged me on LinkedIn. "So, they announced you moved on, but they're asking me to cover your portfolio. Clients are pissed. Any advice?" I stared at the message a long time. Typed. Deleted. Typed again. "I'm sorry they put you in that position. You don't owe them more than you agreed to." She replied with a sad emoji. Nothing else. Then the real surprise. A client email. Personal account. Not the company one. Subject line. Checking in. I opened it carefully. It was from Helen, VP of Operations at one of our biggest accounts. We'd spent years solving impossible problems together. Her team had threatened to walk more than once. I'd held them together with a mix of honesty and after-hours phone calls. Her email was short. Blunt. Just like her. "Heard you're not with them anymore. Sorry to hear. They're fumbling. You okay?" That one made me set my coffee down. Made me actually feel something. Because the company didn't care if I was okay. But the people did. I took my time replying. Kept it professional. But honest. "Appreciate you checking in. Not with them anymore, no. Taking some time to figure out next steps." She didn't sugarcoat her answer. "Their new contact is an idiot. We'll see how long this lasts." I didn't gloat. Didn't encourage her to leave. Didn't ask for business. But I didn't lie, either. By the end of the week, 3 more clients reached out. Some polite, some furious, all wanting to know why the person they trusted had vanished without warning. I didn't give them details. Didn't badmouth the firm. Just told the truth in the fewest words I could. I'm not with them. Contract didn't obligate me to stay. That was enough. Clients weren't stupid. They could read between the lines. The best part? I hadn't sent a single resume. Hadn't updated LinkedIn. Wasn't even sure what I'd do next. But they were the ones reaching out. Because trust is currency. And I'd spent 9 years banking it. Meanwhile, inside Held and Bryce, I heard the stories trickle out. Not from me. From people, still stuck there. They had no one to explain the pipeline. No one who knew the legacy billing quirks. No one who could talk the client off the ledge when something broke. Because all that had lived in my head. And they'd decided it was too expensive. Dylan called late one night. Not even pretending it was business. Sounded tired. Beat down. They don't know what they're doing. Priya's thinking of leaving. They offered me your old title with a pay cut. I let that sink in. "Take it if you have to," I said carefully. "But know what it costs." He didn't reply. Didn't have to. I didn't tell anyone to quit. Didn't recruit. Didn't scheme. But I didn't have to. They were watching the collapse in real time. They could see the writing on the wall. It was in the client emails. The late-night panics. The revolving door. And me? I stayed quiet. Didn't brag. Didn't gloat. I just sat in my kitchen with my coffee, watching the rain, knowing I'd finally stop playing their game. Because revenge doesn't always look like setting the place on fire. Sometimes it's walking away and letting them realize who actually kept the lights on. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. And then the calls started coming not from them, but from the clients who wanted to know where I'd landed. It wasn't immediate. They didn't all call the next day, or the next week. Some had no idea I was gone yet. Others thought I was just on vacation, or at a conference. Halden and Bryce didn't exactly broadcast my exit. They buried it. Hoped the clients wouldn't notice until they'd locked in Q1 renewals. But clients notice. They always do. The first call came from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. Listened later in my car. Helen's voice. "Raid. Hey. Just. Checking in. Give me a call." No explanation. Didn't need one. I called back that evening. She didn't bother with hello. "Where the hell did you go?" I smiled despite myself. "Not there anymore." "Yeah, I got that. You didn't even tell me." I paused. It wasn't that kind of exit. Silence on the line. Then a sigh. "God damn it. You were the only reason I kept them on contract." I stayed quiet. Because there was nothing polite to say to that. She huffed. "Look, we've got a renewal coming up. And I'll be blunt. I don't want to sign if you're not there. Where are you going?" That made me sit down. Right on the edge of my bed. "Haven't decided yet." "Bullshit." I actually laughed. "Swear to God I haven't." Another pause. Quieter this time. "Let me know when you do." I don't want to deal with them without you. I let that sink in. Because that was worth more than any severance. Will do, I said. And meant it. I thought that would be it for the week. It wasn't. 2 days later, another voicemail. Marco, old vendor lead I'd saved from a contract meltdown. Read. Man, just tell me you're alive. They said you transitioned. I don't buy it. Where you at? I called him back at lunch. Hey. He didn't even greet me. You leaving them, or them leaving you? Little of both. He barked a laugh. Figures. They're lost without you. We can't get an answer on shipping SLAs to save our lives. I didn't gloat. Didn't trash talk. Just listened. Finally, he said what they all said. Whatever you do next, let us know. Seriously. We're not married to them. We're married to you. That one stuck with me, because I'd never planned it that way. Never set out to make myself indispensable. I just did the work. Answered the phone at 11 p.m. Said yes when they needed someone to say yes. Did what the contract didn't require. It was weird, freeing, terrifying, humbling. Because now, if I wanted, I could take them with me. If I really wanted revenge, I could hollow Halden and Bryce out like a rotted log. But I didn't. At least not yet, because I wasn't sure I wanted to be that guy. The messages kept coming. LinkedIn requests from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Short, clipped emails from client VPs who never used to have time for me. A Slack DM from Priya. I'm out too. Couldn't stand it after you left. Where you landing? I read it twice. Typed. Deleted. Typed again. Figuring it out. She responded with a thumbs up. No other words. She didn't need them. I dug out my old notebook. The one with handwritten client notes. Names. Pain points. Renewal cycles. I didn't use it. Didn't need to. But I ran my fingers over the cover, because I remembered all of it anyway. That was the real currency. Not their CRM system. Not their Salesforce reports. Me. What I knew. Who I'd helped. Who trusted me. I wasn't naive. I knew what it meant. I could spin up a consultancy in 6 weeks with the right partners, or join a competitor who'd kill to have those relationships, or go independent, call my own shots. I didn't rush it, didn't chase, didn't email anyone first. I let them come to me, because when you're the one they call, you've already won. Marissa watched me scribble in the notebook one night. Work? I nodded. Kind of. You gonna go back to that office? I shook my head. No, honey. I don't think so. She accepted that. Kids are good at reading the truth in your voice. She didn't ask again, because this wasn't about going back. It was about deciding where I'd go next, and who I'd take with me. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. When I finally decided what came next, it wasn't about revenge. It was about building something better. I didn't make any big announcement. No LinkedIn post about exciting new ventures. No press release. No launch party. Just a conversation. Over coffee. With people who'd been watching the same slow collapse I had. Priya was the first to sit across from me. She looked exhausted, but there was relief in her face, too. They didn't even try to replace you, she said. They just shoved your accounts on me. I didn't apologize, because it wasn't mine to fix anymore. But I listened. She stirred her coffee. They offered me your title. Half the pay. Full workload. I raised an eyebrow. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Yeah, I told them no. We sat in silence a while. Then I asked the question I'd been chewing on for weeks. What would it take for you to do it the right way? She blinked. The right way? Treat the clients like humans. Pay people fairly. Stop calling people costs. Actually solve problems instead of burying them in jargon. She smiled slowly. That's a big ask. I didn't look away. I'm serious. She didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just nodded once. I'm listening. That was enough. After that, words spread quietly. Not recruiting. Not poaching. Just talking. Dylan messaged late one night. You building something? I answered honestly. Thinking about it. He replied a minute later. If you do, let me know. Vendors too. Marco texted. Heard you're out. If you need a shipping partner, you know we're in. Clients kept pinging. Nothing formal. Just checking in. Seeing if there was a new address they should know about. I didn't promise anything. Didn't sign anyone. Didn't make grand plans. But I started sketching in a notebook. Cost structures. Head counts. Values. Not slogans. Real values. One night, after Marissa was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, wrote at the top, "What we don't do," underlined it twice. No bullshit titles. No pay cuts to align with market. No lying to clients. No hiding bad news. No humiliating employees for sport. I read it back, felt my chest loosen. It wasn't much, but it was a start, because I'd learned something in 9 years. Companies don't fail because they don't have processes. They fail because they forget why they exist. To solve problems, to treat people well enough they stay, to make promises they actually keep. I wasn't naive. I'd seen enough spreadsheets to know margins mattered, but I also knew the cost of turnover, the cost of training replacements every 6 months, the cost of alienated clients, the cost of treating humans like widgets. They thought firing me saved them money, but it lost them trust. And trust is expensive to replace. I wrote another heading. What we do. Be honest with clients, even when it hurts. Pay people fairly. Train them like they matter. Treat vendors like partners. Make it boringly consistent. It was late. The house creaked. The fridge buzzed. I sat there a long time staring at those lists. Because they weren't revolutionary. They were so simple it was embarrassing. Simple is hard, but it works. A week later, I met with Priya again. She brought her own notes. Color-coded tabs. Bullets. She pointed at my list. This is good. But you're missing something. I raised an eyebrow. She circled it with her pen. Make sure the clients know why it's different. I let out a breath. Smiled, despite myself. Yeah, you're right. We didn't shake hands on anything. Didn't sign anything. Didn't incorporate that night. But it was the first time in months I felt like the floor wasn't going to drop out from under me. It wasn't revenge. Not anymore. It was prevention. It was making sure no one else got that same folded paper with the salary cut and the new title in Arial font. I closed the notebook, tapped it once on the table. The sound felt final. Resolved. Marissa called from her room. Dad? Yeah? Everything okay? I looked at the lists. Nodded. Yeah, kiddo. I think it will be. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. Because in the end, the best revenge wasn't taking them down. It was making sure I never let them decide my worth again. I still keep the folder in my closet. Not front and center. Not on display. But not hidden either. Inside, the original contract. Yellowed. Creased at the edges. Clause 7.4 highlighted in fading neon. The signed apology. Corporate letterhead. Legal black and white language that reads like a confession. And my resignation email. Short. Final. Proof. Not of revenge. Of memory. Of why I won't let it happen again. I don't flip through it often. But I don't forget it's there. Because forgetting is how it starts. Forgetting is how you get comfortable enough to let them cut you in half with a smile. Some nights I sit at the kitchen table after Marissa is asleep. The same table where I read that contract line by line. Where I drafted the email that forced them to sign my words. I look at my notebook. The new one. With scribbles about cost structures, onboarding plans, vendor contracts, notes from quiet conversations with people who want something better. It's not a company yet. Not officially. But it's an idea that's growing roots. Because the best revenge wasn't making them squirm in a boardroom. It wasn't the apology they signed. It wasn't the clients who followed. Or the coworkers who refused to train their replacements. It was refusing to let them decide my worth again. Ever. They thought they could redefine me with a title change. With a number on a page. With an ambush meeting and a cheap pen shoved across the table. They thought I'd thank them for scraps. That I'd hand over my knowledge and wave politely on the way out. That I'd be so humiliated I'd stay quiet forever. They forgot one thing. I read what they wrote. It wasn't clever. It wasn't sabotage. It was just paying attention. It was knowing that words matter. That signatures matter. That people matter. And making sure they had to say it out loud. On paper. In their own language. I didn't torch the place on my way out. Didn't recruit their clients with poached emails. Didn't blast them on LinkedIn. I just walked away. And let the hole they dug for me become the hole they had to climb out of themselves. Because they never replaced me. They replaced a line item. A salary band. A cost center. But they couldn't replace the calls at midnight. The vendors who'd only deal with me. The client who trusted my voice over a brand. The staff who knew I'd take the heat for them. They thought I was expensive. They had no idea what cheap cost them. Now, I'm not in a rush. I'm meeting with people who want to build something that lasts. Something that doesn't need fine print to protect its employees from its owners. Something boringly, stubbornly honest. We'll see if it works. I'm not promising anything, except that I won't forget. And I won't let them decide for me again, because in the end, the best revenge isn't watching them fail. It's refusing to let them write your story at all. It's taking back the pen. Marissa asked me once why I quit. We were watching a movie, something silly with talking animals. She didn't even look at me, just asked, "Did they make you mad?" I thought about lying, saying it was complicated, that it wasn't her business, but kids deserve better. So I told her. They didn't respect me, so I left. She blinked, "Oh," and went back to watching the movie. Simple. True. Enough. Sometimes I think that's the only lesson worth teaching her. That respect isn't optional. That you don't stay where you're treated like you don't matter. That you can leave, even if it costs you, even if it scares you. Especially then. I don't know if my plan will work. If this little idea will turn into something real. If the people who call me will actually sign. If the vendors who promise loyalty will follow through. But I know this. They won't be deciding my worth again. That's mine. Always was. Always will be. I lean back at the table, close the folder one last time, set my notebook on top of it, new over old, future over past, and I exhale, because for the first time in years, I'm not worried about being fired. I'm not worried about being demoted. I'm not worried about what they'll say in a meeting I'm not invited to. I'm just done. They wrote the rules. I just read them better. If you've ever seen someone treated like they were disposable, hit the subscribe button so more stories like this get told. And if you've got one of your own, share it. People need to hear it.